We hang the petty thieves and appoint the great ones to public office. ASAP. Welcome back to the channel. America is facing a crisis. Most of us never expected. In many states, more people are dying than being born. It's just not a statistic, it's a warning. Declining birth rates, an aging population, and an exploding national debt are colliding. In today's video, we'll hear from Representative David Schweikert as he explains how these forces threaten our economy and why we can't just borrow our way out of it. Let's go.
Well, I don't care if you're on the left, right, but having a society that grows and becomes prosperous and it becomes more and more productive and can provide better things is moral. But also, why is it so hard? Look, this was done by our own CBO, taking updates from the data from the Census Bureau. In 8 years, the United States has more deaths than births. Last year, we had 17 states that had more deaths than births. Okay. So, and if you read through, the term now has become absence of young people. And there's lots of crazy discussions. There's entire books. I have all these things on my shelves about natalist policies and how many countries have tried to encourage higher fertility rates and all failed. There really is no success in the entire world. They've been able to move forward some of the fertility rates spiking up, and then they go back and fall back to the mean. It is the nature of wealth, is the nature of modern societies. But then you come to me and say, David, you're on Ways and Means. You chair the Joint Economic Committee, so you have all these economists that work for you. Show me how we're going to have 3% GDP growth every year. I can show you how to do it. I just need you to understand the United States is better off than so many countries. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we're having fewer children than countries like France. 8 years, we have more deaths than births. And you all remember your first year of economics class where they walked through your formula and said, well, population growth, then capital expenditures for plant and equipment that are more productive, then spikes in technology. That's how you build the wealth of a nation. We are losing one of the things. So when you see people like me walk behind these microphones, you need to hear coming out of their mouths, I'm willing to actually deal with the reality of how do we make capital investments in equipment that makes us more productive? How do we encourage the synthetic biology that makes us not only live longer, but able to survive and do well and enjoy life? How do you actually deal with not being fearful of AI and artificial intelligence, but use that to make this another American century?
This is just about lesser babies. When deaths outnumber births, the workforce shrinks. And that means lesser taxpayers to fund everything from roads to Social Security. The foundation of our economic engine starts to crack.
We hold the two greatest extraordinary privileges from a worldwide economist. We have to start understanding the math and what we're up against, because it's not us. The entire world. Now, you start to take a look at what's going on, and I know some of these charts are almost impossible to read, but the basic points of many of these is we've all talked about, well, baby boomers, they're, a couple more years and all of them are 65 up, and we have this huge population bubble. And the fact of the matter is, over the next 10 years, we hate to say this because we get booed at our town halls when we say this, the next 10 years, almost 100% of U.S. debt is interest and the growth of the cost of Medicare. And we've known for how many years baby boomers were going to turn 65? 65 years. But we didn't plan for it, we didn't set it aside. And one thing we weren't ready for as a society, in 1990, fertility rates started to roll over. So it's the absence, as the McKinsey report goes up and down, it's the absence of young people.
Every major government program depends on a growing base of workers paying into the system. When that base shrinks, but obligations keep growing, the math simply stops working. And as you'll see, That's where debt comes in.
Society, we call them the quartiles, which I sort of despise that term. You didn't graduate high school, so what you do economically is you sell your willingness to work. You go out and hang drywall, you bust your backside, and then tomorrow you're competing against millions of other people with the same skill set. And you actually look at how our economy works and the fact that, let's be brutal, populations under a certain income, they will receive services from our society because we're a compassionate society. But when you start to see a talent-based immigration system, you have people here, because the productivity they bring to society, turns out when you look at their career, they pay a boatload of taxes and actually help us grow. Need to deal with the math. And the fact of the matter is, we look over and over at these things, and you see countries like the United States. Now, I'm just using Japan because it's easy. Japan has, almost 300% debt to GDP, but it's a unique society because their corporations, their individuals, actually finance almost their entire debt, where the United States, we're chewing up much of our capital stock now because we're borrowing somewhere between maybe 70 to, if you actually just take this fiscal year, as high as $80,000 every second. Every second of every day we're borrowing. We borrow $6-7 billion every single day. So, and I've done the chart before, but think about this. We click off an additional $1 trillion of borrowing about every 125 days. You think it's going to go on forever? I'm going to show you in part of the second part of this, the number of the biggest bond traders in the world. When Larry Fink, when Ray Dalio are basically saying, you guys got a problem and it's coming fast. When they're actually taking billions of dollars and starting to hedge even the U.S. bonds, saying, we think you're going to 5-6%. And understand, if the United States ever went back to what was normal before the Great Recession of 2008, we went back to a 6% handle on U.S. debt. In 9 years, 45% of all tax collections are interest. Why doesn't that scare the crap out of people? And then we're going to engage in policies where we're doing our best to scare to death the very people we're turning to and saying, please buy our bonds. How do we do what's necessary, particularly in reconciliation, to not hurt working people by having their taxes go up because of the expiring provisions of TCJA, but also at the same time deal with the math that if we finance everything, because we're already scheduled to borrow about $22 trillion additional between now and I think 2034. Is the intent to stack another $5 trillion on top of that? You don't think the bond markets aren't going to punish us? Because little bits of interest just crush not only the U.S. government, but they crush working people. How many people can afford a mortgage right now when it's over 7%? How many can afford the car loan? Understand, we just went through functionally 3-4 years of inflation where in my community, if you don't make 27% more, you're poor today.
The cost curve is brutal. An Asian population needs more medical care, more retirement benefits, and more support. But with fewer workers paying in, the gap between what we owe and what we earn widens every year. The only way to fill that gap, more borrowing.
All right, now on to sort of the reality where we're at. We actually got, I'm going to call it better news. CBO actually did some calculations and said, hey, we expect tax receipts to be up in this fiscal year. So I've come here repeatedly and shown my chart that says for every dollar the United States takes in all sorts of tax receipts. And remember, most of those tax receipts are going to Social Security, Medicare, those sorts of things. But for every dollar we take in, 39 cents, $1.39 is spent. Guess what? The good news is now it's no longer $1.39 of spending for every dollar we take in. Now it's $1.36. Got better. still terrifyingly bad. And this is the improvement that so many people were running around being giddy about. So let's actually sort of walk through some of these numbers as quickly as we can. Federal spending as a share of total tax revenues. The reason I'm showing you this is to give you an idea the scale we're up against. If you actually take all of our tax receipts, every dime, and say, here's what we call mandatory spending. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans benefits, and interest, because you got to pay your interest. You know, we're the ones who basically binge on debt. It consumes every dollar of tax receipts plus some. We actually don't collect enough taxes to pay for our mandatory spending and our interest. And that's our basic problem, is if you do net interest and mandatory spending, it consumes everything.
Borrowing more sounds harmless until you realize that every dollar borrowed comes with interest. Over time, those interest payments start eating the budget alive, crowding out other priorities.
Because you look at charts like this, where this right here is break even. This is where the dollars. And even this year, every dime of discretionary and a little sliver of mandatory are on borrowed money once again. And the only reason I threw this chart in the way it is, where we did 24, 25, you see this? That was with the CBO's calculations that, hey, the law says next year they get to take in 400 billion some additional taxes because Americans' taxes go up. Well, we don't want that to happen. We want to protect hardworking people. The very last board I'm going to show here is the way you protect American people is you offset as much of that as you can, because you give it to hardworking folks and then you take it away from them in higher interest costs, in higher financing costs. You smile at them, you hand them $1 in their face, and you're grabbing their wallet from behind and stealing it from them. That moment of telling the truth about math is really important. Look, I brought a lot of the boards just trying to explain that, last couple of years, 39 cents out of every dollar, for every dollar we took in tax receipts, we spent $1.39. This year we're going to spend $1.36, which means all that differential. Reason I have this, it's a little complex, but I'll make it super, super simple as best I can. You're going to hear lots of, particularly Democrats and others, say, well, the tax reform, it caused this, it caused that. Well, the charts now, you got to work through the credible craziness of the pandemic. But if you actually take a look at the matching of TCJA and what we expected to be inflation-adjusted tax receipts. So I'm not playing the scam of, look at how much more money we're getting, even though we've had like 25% inflation. An honest number, when you actually calculate it and normalize it, guess what? Tax receipts are pretty much right on track.
It's a vicious cycle. Fewer workers, higher debt, more interest, less room for anything else. And without a change in demographics, no tax rate can keep up with the demand.
And we have a couple of these, to give you sort of a sense. When you take a look at annual revenues match pre-TCJA projections, this one's important, and we often don't actually talk about it. Go back to the baseline numbers of CBO and joint tax before we did tax reform in 2017, and then step up to where we are today and take a look where we are, where baseline is. Adjust for inflation, it's normal. The math is normal. So when someone says, well, it's because you did this tax reform and you helped the economy, I'm not standing in front of you saying tax cuts pay for themselves. What I am saying is the scale of the economy actually today is right on track to what the projections were before tax reform. Some of that say it's a complex calculation of everything from technology adoptions to new ways we do things to productivity gains. But the baseline number is the baseline number. And back to trying to make the point. Do we have is the issue with the United States binging on debt? Is it we don't collect enough taxes, or is it we spend too much money? I've done entire presentations here where I've shown high marginal tax rates, low marginal tax rates, and we seem to hold about 17% of the size of the economy in taxes. 17% of GDP you'll often hear. And it's historic. It just somehow, when you raise up the marginal tax rates, you're getting 17% of the economy. But and part of that is a offset because the economy slows down. When you've done low marginal tax rates, economy grows. So you're getting 17% of the economy because the economy is expanded. Trying to make the point that growth is moral, it's also great economics. How do you grow, grow, grow? But I just showed you in the beginning portion of this, we got an issue. In 8 years, we have more deaths than births. We have a demographic issues. Remember, debt demographics. Demographics are your destiny. So, look, I'm just trying to point out on this. Over the last 4 years, we functionally have borrowed $7.8 trillion in deficits. That borrowing functionally is a current stimulus effect, but you're going to pay for it. It's coming out of your retirement, whether you know it or not. It's coming out of your kids. The insanity is, I'm 62, my wife's 62. I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 2.5-year-old, and they're the same birth mom we've adopted. My little boy, when he's 24, to keep baseline services, so just to keep things, what's that fancy word? Ceteris paribus, keep things even. United States in about 22 years would have to double every single tax. The math basically says my kids will be part of the first generation in America that will be poorer. That's the morality of this place. But David, adopting modernization and cutting spending's really, really hard, and we're going to get someone that's going to say mean things about us. So you're willing to screw over your kids.
This isn't just about numbers on the spreadsheet. It's about the kind of country we lead to the next generation, a smaller, older America, risks losing its competitive edge in the global economy.
So that's why the real number, like for this year, is going to be closer to $2.3 trillion. Because there's about another $300 billion out there that we borrow internally that we got to also pay back and also have to pay interest. So let's make a point here. Budget deficits are heading to, now I got to make the point, and if there's any staffer who actually writes memos for your boss, this is the one I want you to memorize. If we do the tax hikes that are coming and we don't offset them, we don't pay for them, in 9 years, we're no longer at 7% of the economy in borrowed money. We're at, I think it is 9.2% of the economy is in borrowed money. When the smart people are starting to tell us that small changes in interest rates, are we really dead set on trying to freak out our bankers? The people we turn to and say, please buy U.S. bonds. Help us finance the fact that we can't stop spending.
If we want to break the cycle, we need a two-front approach. Policies that encourage family growth and policies that rein in government spending. One without the other won't fix the problem.
We're playing with live ammunition here, and we seem terrified to own a calculator. So you're going to tell our brothers and sisters, the hardworking people of this country, we're not going to let your taxes be raised. Absolutely. But we don't want to do things that are hard and get yelled at by a lobbyist or some group back home. So we're just going to borrow the money. So we're going to give it to you. And then a few years from now, you're going to find out that productivity in the country has slowed down because the capital stack Another $4 trillion we've sucked out of the economy doesn't get lent to your business, to you buying a house, to the new to the new piece of equipment.
Schweikert believes the left and right must work together to overcome this debt. A bipartisan solution must be hatched to stop the dollar debasement. Politicians need to have a long-term mindset when crafting policies, or the cost of living will continue to steadily increase.
And the economists have already done the calculations, basically saying, I'm sorry, it got crumpled as I was marching over here. You want to maximize the economic growth and the wealth of this country. This is a CBO report. It's been vetted by my economists and Joint Economic. You want to maximize prosperity in the curve. You offset the spending because you're screwing up the available capital, because the reason these people are writing really smart bond houses, are now writing articles, is the binging on debt that's going on in this country, but China and so many other places. Why do you think Great Britain this summer took down their government? Their bonds exploded, they lost their government. What the hell do you think is going on in France? What do you think is going on in Germany? What do you think happened in South Korea? What do you think was happening in Canada? All these countries, even Germany, who are just trying to deal with the financing costs of their pensions, the levies. And the United States is much better off than many of these countries, but it's coming fast for us. Do hard things today, maximize prosperity tomorrow for every working person, but also for my kids, maybe for your pension, your retirement. Because, Mr. Speaker, getting older isn't Republican or Democrat, it's math. Go to CBO's data and tell the truth. 100% of the debt for the next 30 years is Social Security and Medicare. The rest of the government actually grows slower than tax receipts. And it's like $124 trillion of borrowing, but everything is basically, we call discretionary, military, discretionary, is actually squeezed to grow slower than the tax receipts. It actually has what they calculate as a positive balance. This isn't mean, because the fact of the matter is we've demonstrated here over and over, you could modernize how we deliver so many of these things to our brothers and sisters who've earned their benefits. You just have to be willing to tell the bureaucracy and the deliverers of those services, saying, we expect you to modernize. Because those of us that fixation on watching the bond futures, the debt markets, today's interest rates are almost a full point higher than they were December 1st. If that 1% works its way into U.S. bonds, over the next 10 years, it's almost $3 trillion of additional spending. It's almost everything we're talking about trying to cut. Grow up, figure out how to actually act like we are the board of directors of the biggest economy in the world, understand math, and start being fiscally disciplined. It doesn't mean cruel. It's not cutting and slashing, because if you don't communicate to the world's who we ask for money, they raise our interest rates. And those interest rates are much more cruel than anything we could possibly do.
This is the part we can't ignore. The math is simple, but the consequences are severe. A shrinking workforce and rising debt can't coexist forever. Whether through policy change, innovation, or cultural shift, the choice is ours. Because in the end, the numbers don't care about politics, they just add up. Thanks for watching. If you find this eye-opening, share it, because this is a conversation America needs to have now, not later. Peace.